Let's talk about a favourite topic of the day, which is rates, where they're going. How do we sense when we are nearing the end of rates? What do you think will drive the cycle?
Yeah, well, I think that rates will remain stubbornly high for a period of time. Obviously, over the last couple of years, many investors have been surprised consistently by the amount of rate rises and how rapid they've sort of been and how stubborn inflation has been. But I think now markets are getting a sense of that. And I think that rates will remain high over the next year or two and then gradually come down.
Let's talk about the asset class that you look after, which is in the senior secured loan market. Perhaps most people will appreciate seniority in the ranking. Let's talk about secured. How comfortable can we be about security in an intangible world, for example?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, whether assets are intangible or tangible, it's really about assessing the value of those assets and what you would expect to get in a recovery type situation in default. And so that includes analysing the business as a going concern, but also in terms of a liquidation. And just because a business has more intangible assets doesn't necessarily mean you have lower recovery rates. It's more nuanced than that. And so you want to have a sense in terms of whether or not the business or its assets is saleable to its competitors and the like. So yeah, we don't have concerns about the level of intangible assets. It can be valued and analysed by the credit team.
The range of spreads in your asset class, I think, varies quite a lot. Obviously, you can go high risk, presumably for high return. How do you choose where you think the sweet spot is and mispricing in terms of those spreads?
Yeah, well, it's very much individual company specific. So you want to assess what is the minimum spread you should be getting paid to take on the actual risk within the corporate in terms of its probability of default and recovery on default, and then maximising the spread the market is paying you versus that minimum spread you should be getting paid to compensate you for that. And that's, as I said, it's quite company specific. So you can have spreads from 3 all the way to 6%. But you want to do your bottom-up analysis on whether or not you're getting a good reward for the amount of risk you're taking on in every individual corporate.
And can you just talk briefly about how frequently you would trade these kinds of securities, what the maturity of these securities are, whether they get prepaid and therefore you get a bonus being prepaid or some fee? Just give us a little comment.
This is a highly liquid and regularly traded market. And so to give you a sense in terms of portfolio turnover, it would typically be about 50% turnover. In terms of the tenor of the loans, it can be anywhere from about 5 to 7 years, but typically they get repaid early given the ability for the corporate to repay. And so the average tenor of a loan typically is around about 3 years.
Let's talk about some of the misconceptions. In particular, I guess one is always this constant talk about defaults. I mean, how important are defaults and what impact does defaults actually have on a portfolio like yours where you're being very specific about security selection?
Yeah, so you're spot on. That's the common misconception. Because these corporates are rated BB or below, people automatically assume that that's high risk, and it's not the case because of the senior secured status. So whether you look at the volatility or frequency of negative returns or risk of capital loss, the risk within this asset class is very low, and that's proven over a 30-plus year period. In terms of defaults, the average defaults through history are about 2.7%. But importantly, because you're senior secured, you get about 65 cents in the dollar back. So your actual credit loss per annum is 1%, and you're getting paid spreads of 4.7% above cash to well and truly compensate you for that.
In high-yielding instruments, people got a fear, 5 years ago when energy was highly concentrated in high yield. What is the concentration like in the senior secured loans and how diverse are the industries?
Yeah, so there's more than 20 industries, so the industry diversity is great. So the largest industries in our portfolio are typically around about 10%. So in that regard, US and European loans can be a great complement to domestic credit exposures where you're much more concentrated by industry and issuer. Okay,
final question. We're heading into the footy finals. Where and how does an AFL game parallel into fixed income? At which position would you or particularly senior secured loans play in a footy field?
Yeah, well, I'll answer on sort of from my perspective. I love being in the trenches, so I'd want to be in the middle of the ground where the action is, and I'll draw the parallel with my view on markets. You know, I love being in areas where there's never a dull moment and getting the hands dirty and doing, deep analysis on the situation.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Giselle.